Economic challenges face us every single day in the real world, but if you look at the stock market, you can see it doing better than ever. We witnessed it go to record levels recently, and that should translate into a healthy economy. But is that really what's going on? We're going to take a look at that today. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's look at this article out of Bloomberg. U.S. stocks extend an all-time high with the fifth day of gains. That is incredible news for the world economy because the stock market is the single most important factor for determining the health of the economy. I mean, that must be the case because, of course, people shouldn't have money to invest in the stock market if they're hurting at home. But, of course, once again, we know the real data, and that is that there's a growing wealth inequality, and that has become something, over the past few years, especially ever since the financial crisis. Things have been getting worse and worse for the middle class. We've seen increased taxation. At the same time, we've seen lower wages, but of course that is not taken into account. So how exactly is the stock market increasing? Well, number one, you have incentives for the central banks to be purchasing their shares. That's right. The S&P is being bought up by central banks around the world, and they are given incentives to do so, something I've covered here often on this program. And there are no real individual investors hopping in and not enough money to actually make waves. So let's go into this right here. Again, we have another boom, and that is real estate. Now, this specifically is just one example, but the median asking price for a house in Sydney, Australia has topped $1 million for the first time. That's right. If you buy real estate, it just goes up and up and up, and there is no need to ever think that it will go down. I did a video on Australia recently, and many people were disagreeing, but here's the fact. I get the same thing happening in Canada. A lot of people will argue me to death. They will become blue in the face in order to have their normalcy bias unchallenged. They do not want to think that their world will have to change. They want to know that all of that money they invested into their home is going to really stay there and remain. But the fact is that if this economy was really strong, if the housing market was really strong, it could withstand higher interest rates. But everyone, even the so-called real estate professionals, they are even saying the same thing. Well, you know what? They're not going to increase interest rates. That's what they say. But historically, we're at extremely low, near record level low on the interest rates. So if it becomes a historical average of interest rate, even let's say they were to double where it is today, which is still considered to be relatively low for the 30-year mortgage rates, let's say, it is going to bankrupt a lot of people. They cannot really afford what these prices are. It is impossible. The only reason that they are able to afford these rising prices is because the interest rates are practically near zero, and that is around the world. You're looking at that. So of course they're able to continue to buy in, and in a way they figure, well, my money in the bank's not getting me anything. I might as well put it into my home. And many people use home equity loans, which are extremely dangerous. You can't do that expecting the market to continue to rise forever. Markets have to crash. Look at Canada. Even that is a good example. You looked at a major housing crash that occurred in the early 90s, but people seem to forget about that. In fact, a lot of the real estate professionals, they call themselves, but they were not in that business even at that time. So they joined up more recently than that. And then, of course, their whole career, the market has been increasing. And of course, that's their mentality. But you need to be smart about this and realize the historical data. And that is that interest rates are at near all-time lows right now, and of course that's making a huge difference. Now, what else is going up in price? Let's look at this. This is right here out of CNS News. Average price of electricity climbs to an all-time record. That's right. So not only is it your housing price and your stocks that are going up, it's also the price of electricity. And my personal electricity bills just went up. Isn't that so generous of them? Even though they're saying that everything is doing just fine right now, why in the world would the prices need to go up? And that is the printed dollars that are flowing around. It is increasing the cost of everything. Nominally, everything is increasing. What else is increasing? That's right, that's the food prices, the FAO food price index in nominal and real terms, both going up over the past decade. And you're looking at this happening right now at a time where we cannot afford food price increases. It is something that we just cannot do because of all the other burdens that we face of major taxation. Food price is the most important thing to look at, and you're looking at this as soon as they began going wild on the money printing, and that is really ever since the beginning of the year 2000. We've seen everything increase, everything get worse at that point. It's just never gotten better since then, and particularly since the financial crisis, we've seen a lot of damage being done to the middle class. So let's go on. In my book, I wrote about this. The Fed uses what they call core inflation, which excludes energy and food prices. By definition, that is intentional propaganda. So at the beginning, I showed you how the stock prices are increasing. I showed you how real estate is increasing. Now, what if I just did what the mainstream media did, and instead of showing you the food prices and electricity increasing, I just removed those tabs and I continued on with my video? Well, I would be withholding the truth, and that is not what we want to do. We want to look into what's increasing. You know, it's not just what they think it is. So when they have their fake CPI number, I really laugh at it. They can keep it down below 2% as long as they don't include the food and energy prices. Electricity is going up. Why do they not factor this in? It doesn't make a single ounce of sense. My bills are going up. My food bills are going up too. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you. Look at your prices that you were paying last year. Look at them this year. Things are going up and they're just not accounting for that. And this is what I called intentional propaganda. So this connects in with this. U.S. and China agreed to new cuts to combat climate change. This news is out of Bloomberg. And basically what we have is a situation in which they want to reduce the carbon emissions for the world. Now, I'm not going to get into the deeper story behind this, but essentially they're saying they want to cut back. Now, how exactly are they going to do that? And ultimately, we're going to have higher prices to pay. And that's what we faced with the Obama when he basically was intentionally trying to bankrupt coal because he's saying it's polluting. But instead of really doing anything about that, they are really just increasing the prices that people pay because they are shutting down the plants and not replacing that power in the US. So all that does is make the middle class and the lower class have this bigger burden upon them. And this is something, again, that they can't afford right now. President Barack Obama pledged deeper U.S. cuts in greenhouse gas emissions, and China will, for the first time, set a target on capping carbon emissions under an agreement between the world's two biggest economies. Now, speaking of economies here, look at this. China seen overtaken U.S. as the world's biggest oil user. This is on Bloomberg again. China will overtake the U.S. as the world's biggest oil consumer within 2 decades, according to the International Energy Agency. That is big news. I'll just read the highlighted portion. A landmark is reached in the early 2030s when China becomes the largest oil-consuming country, crossing paths with the United States. We're looking at major changes occurring in the near future here, and the public isn't ready. The middle class definitely is not ready, and we are going to see major changes happening whether the people are ready or not. So connected in with that also is this. Iran signs Russia Reactor deal as the nuclear talks falter. We're looking at alliances being formed, factions and sides being formed throughout the world, and we've definitely seen this with the BRIC nations. Iran signed an agreement with Russia to obtain as many as 8 new reactors as the world powers struggle to reach an accord, capping the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. This is interesting because Right now, you have Russia and China partnering up in every which way. At the same time, you have them pulling away from NATO and pulling away from the US. And there's a lot of things going on here. It goes deeper than just this, but we will definitely see sides being formed. We see this happening now at the time when we need more peace and more prosperity, but we definitely are seeing the war drums, the saber rattling occurring, and this is very frightening. Now, this right here is undoubtedly one of the worst things I have seen in recent times, that of the Daily Caller. Now, I'm going to read just a few things from it, but this is what really sums it up. Obamacare architect Jonathan Gruber said the lack of transparency was a major part of getting Obamacare passed because of the stupidity of the American voter would have killed the law if more people knew what it was. And this guy was an MIT professor who served as a technical consultant to the Obama administration during the Obamacare design. Now, I'm going to read you his quote directly from him, and you can also watch the video if you haven't already. This is a tax, and they needed to show people that it's, or prove to them that it's not a tax. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, that's exactly what it was. Take a look at this. The bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay, so it's written to do that. In terms of risk-rated subsidies, if you had a law which said that healthy people are going to pay in, you made it explicit healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. And what do you think that's going to happen after this? We have seen this happen right now, that healthy people are paying higher premiums, and that's exactly what they want. They want the people to be more poor. This is a twofold thing where you have companies making money off it, and at the same time you want the public to become more poor. The more poor the public is, then the more basically subdued by their government they are. Lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. That's what he said. That's his quote. Lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And that's exactly what they do with all of their government schemes, with all of the central banks around the world having no transparency whatsoever. Even though Janet Yellen recently just said they're going to be transparent. They promise. They really do promise. And of course, we will see nothing of the sort. Then he said, and basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically that was really, really critical for the thing to pass. Look, I wish Mark was right that we could all make it transparent, but I'd rather have this law than not. We want to do this for your own good. That's what he's saying. And look, if we got to tell a little white lie, that's okay, because we just need this law to pass. We just need it to become into law so that we can rape and pillage everybody. And we're going to do this, and it's going to make a lot of money for a few people. And that's what's been done. It is another set of taxes upon the people. Yes, a lot of things are rising. The stock market is rising. You're looking at housing prices rising in certain areas. But at the same time, you have food prices rising, you have electricity prices rising, you have taxes rising. And ultimately, after all of this, the middle class is getting more poor. And that's what I focus on. I do not remove the information. I do not submit the propaganda like the mainstream media. We are here to unveil the truth. And we're doing this together, and we are witnessing it. And we have facts like this, like when they call us stupid right to our faces and they think they can get away with it, well, they simply cannot. We see it, and we have realized what the truth is. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. You got to subscribe to the videos on here. It's very important. I would also like to note right now that every single time I do a video on Big Pharma, and this is something that I've noticed, I never mentioned it before, but every time I do a video on Big Pharma, they take away my Google ads on that video. They completely eliminate it. I can't even recheck the box. The box is just gone, and they're taking that away. Nothing, I'm not using anything necessarily copyright or anything. They literally just remove it, and that's the way this goes. And my entire channel could be removed. Look at what happened to X22 Report. Of course, thankfully he got that channel back, but individuals just could be wiped off the face of this. And we're going to see that more and more into the future, I know for sure. Hopefully, I'm able to stay on here. I would also like to note that I know I've been trying to get my videos to go on other websites. I did manage to get one on Dailymotion, so I'm just trying to create a backup on other websites. All of the content will definitely still be here on the YouTube. If you haven't already, please become an insider. It is available at themoneygps.com. You scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.